Over the last few lessons, we've been looking at the strengths and weaknesses of a number of methods from the theoretical, practical and ethical perspective. And we're going to continue that trend today by looking at one of the most commonly and most easy to use sociological research methods there is out there. Today, we're looking at questionnaires. Okay, so we're looking at questionnaires today, but before we actually move into the strengths, the weaknesses and all that, it's good to just break down the two types of questionnaires. So, on one hand, you have the open questionnaires. These have open questions, spoiler alert, in which a respondent can basically write whatever they want in certain fields. The questions are very open, quite broad, and there's not kind of like multiple choice. Closed questionnaires, they can only kind of give fixed answers. These might be multiple choice or one-word answers or yes or no. So open questionnaires are kind of very high validity, the more kind of interpretivist type stuff, whereas the more quantifiable, numerical side comes in the form of closed questionnaires, because those can be quite easily put into data, into statistics, into numbers. Open questionnaires, you get kind of qualitative data, you get written information. So even just from that, you're probably already thinking of a few strengths and weaknesses there. It's just important to note that a lot of the strengths and weaknesses, particularly on the practical and the ethical side, cross over both types of questionnaires. There are a few kind of theoretical strengths and weaknesses which differ. Obviously, because it's quantitative versus qualitative, we already kind of know the basic breakdown of that already. But a lot of it does kind of cross over the two. So let's look at the theoretical strengths and weaknesses of the two types of questionnaires. In terms of closed questionnaires, these can be quite good for creating representative data. So positivists would argue that this is good in order to create wide generalization across a large target population. This, in turn, allows for causal relationships to be created in human behaviour, as long as you have a high response rate. They also have a very high degree of reliability. As long as the questionnaire asks neutral questions and they are closed and easily repeated, this means that there's a high degree of reliability, just making sure that your questionnaire does not have leading or loaded questions. They also produce quantitative and statistical data. This can be put into graphs and tables so that analysis of trends and patterns can take place very easily and very tidily. This is obviously favoured by positivists. On the other hand, open questionnaires have a high degree of validity, as respondents are able to expand on their answers and put what they believe is important into the field. They can put their own opinions, their own thoughts and their own feelings into their answer, allowing that good degree of Verstehen. It also produces vast amounts of qualitative data, really drawing as much information as possible from the study. In terms of weaknesses in the theoretical side of things, many of these weaknesses cross over both the closed and the open questionnaire. Specifically though, closed questionnaires fail to provide a true and meaningful representation of reality, because the candidates are not able to elaborate or explain the context behind some of their answers, and so interpretivists would argue that that does not give any decent validity. And of course the opposite is true in terms of open questionnaires, because although they might be able to expand on some of their answers, it means that different answers are given each time, which means that reliability falls apart, and it also means that it's far harder to gauge patterns and trends. Generally, many interpretivists will argue that questionnaires suffer from what we call the imposition problem. This is where the researcher has identified what he or she believes is important, rather than allowing the respondent to identify this themselves. This is far more a problem in terms of closed questionnaires, because the respondent is not able to give the input that they believe that they should. Okay, so in terms of the theoretical side of things, we know a lot of this stuff already anyway. We know the theoretical kind of strengths of qualitative data, that it gives you a high degree of validity, allows for that construction of Verstehen. All of that we already know, and we know that open questionnaires give us qualitative data, so already we know some theoretical strengths. We also know the theoretical strengths and weaknesses of, say, quantitative data. We know that it allows for the construction of causal relationships, greater generalizability, higher reliability. All of that we already know. So we know that closed questionnaires give us quantitative data, so we can put those two and two together. You already have the strengths and weaknesses essentially of closed questionnaires. The same applies to interviews. When it comes to kind of open versus closed, we already kind of know a good baseline of that already. So the practical and ethical strengths and weaknesses cross over both the closed and the open questionnaires. Both types of questionnaires have a high degree of representativeness, because you can reach a large number of people in a short space of time with very little cost. You're simply just dishing out questionnaires. There's no need to train anyone in order to do that. This gives you an ability to reach a large, geographically dispersed group of people. This is even easier through the use of social media. As they maintain privacy, you can ask potentially embarrassing questions in the questionnaire. This also links to the ethics side of things. There's also a lack of interviewer bias. As a researcher is not there face to face, the respondents are less likely to be influenced by the presence of a researcher. Again, this could also be seen as a theoretical strength. However, on the practical side there are a few weaknesses. Not many people respond to questionnaires. Because you're not face to face with an individual and you don't want to let them down, you don't care as much about completing the questionnaire, so they have a very low response rate. There's also the issue of where people want to give a good impression of themselves when filling out a questionnaire. So there's an extent of right answerism, where they exaggerate, lie, or provide an answer which they think is appropriate. Not only is this theoretically poor, but it's also practically skewing the results. And will you ever truly know if the person filling out your questionnaire is the person that you think it is? There are a few ethical considerations as well. Although the privacy and the anonymity allows for some sensitivity in terms of embarrassing questions, there is also the issue that you're not able to actually build a rapport with your respondent. You're not able to perhaps comfort them or consider their feelings face to face. A questionnaire can be quite a cold way of dealing out very personal information. Okay, so just to kind of wrap things up, and this is a quick one today, but research methods is a kind of very top-heavy module. So once you kind of get through the first few lessons on the theoretical perspectives and the key terms, it does seem to kind of fly by, because a lot of it is just kind of filling in the blanks here and there. Because as you've probably already noticed, we kind of repeat ourselves a lot in a lot of these research methods. Once you know that the basic pros and cons of using qualitative versus quantitative, you simply need to know whether a method is qualitative or quantitative, and you've already got the basic breakdown of where it fits theoretically. So then we just need to kind of fill in the blanks of the kind of ethical, the practical stuff. All of that just kind of fits into place. So yeah, in terms of notices, not a lot today. Obviously, I think what we obviously we've come back this week, so or last week, sorry. So it's good to have you guys back in the classroom. I at least think it was slightly useful coming back, just kind of ask you questions and engage with you a bit more, and that's something, however much I might try, you can never really get unless you're kind of in the classroom. So it's useful. Obviously the live stream is really useful as well, because I can, in terms of the live stream, I think it might be useful maybe if you had any suggestions of how I can better engage with the live stream at the same time as the class. I'm finding that a little bit difficult. So if you have any suggestions, do feel free to send them my way. So I don't want you guys missing out. So any suggestions, shoot them at me. Okay, peace out.